welcome in our own, my colleague, friend, confidant, guy I can trust to know everything Braves, Grant McAuley. He is our Locked On podcast host. He also is a contributor for our Locked On Braves with our own Jake Mastriani as well. Grant, I got to start here, man. Ronald Acuna Jr. You put out an interesting stat that I thought was very, very cool. He became the fourth leadoff hitter in MLB history to record 100 RBIs right behind Mookie Betts. And I bring up Mookie Betts for a reason. So, Bill Plaschke put out that article about the race being over and the super flashy stats, and you should vote for Mookie Betts. But do you think people are going to take to that, the national guys? We know locally how everybody feels he should be the MVP, but do you think the national media is going to kind of err on the side of Bill Plaschke and saying, hey, we know stolen bases are cool, but hey, look at this guy, Mookie Betts stats, and he should be the MVP?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of the stolen base numbers are inflated. And look, nobody's saying that the stolen base hasn't changed in 2023. That's kind of missing the point, though. And the interesting thing about the Plaschke article, which I regret clicking on, but I did because I had to dig through it.
Of course, yeah.
Is that he didn't really go into a whole lot of stats. It was basically like, well, wins above replacement belongs to Mookie. He plays multiple positions, and those things are true. But Ronald Acuna Jr. is right on his heels. And when you look at just the good old-fashioned counting stats, in addition to some of the bigger analytical stats, and just go take a look at the amount of red on Ronald Acuna Jr.'s Baseball Savant page, you start to see the true greatness of this guy. And if you've watched him every day, like I have, you can tell the greatness that is Ronald Acuna Jr. And let me just go ahead and point this out. It doesn't take away from Mookie Betts also being a great player. That's, I think, the plot's getting lost in all of this. Lots of guys have great seasons. Typically only one, with the exception of, I think, 1979, when there was a tie. Only one of them ends up being the MVP. But putting all of that aside, what Ronald Acuna Jr. is doing, it's every single day you go through, he gets to another milestone, whether it's 200 hits, he's closing in on 140 runs scored, he's closing in on 70 stolen bases, he's about to become the fifth member of the 40-40 club with just one more home run in the next 11 games. Then you throw on top of that, most years he could be winning a batting title because he's batting almost 340. He's leading Major League Baseball in on-base percentage, and he has one of the best OPSs that you're going to find in all of baseball as well. And, oh, by the way, somehow, amazingly, this guy cut his strikeout rate in half over the course of last season to this season. Everything that Ronald Acuna Jr. has done at the age of 25 just lets you know that this is a baseball superstar. That doesn't take away from anybody else's case, and I'm not even going to drop names at this point. But you just have to look at this greatness and I think appreciate it because we've never seen a season like Ronald Acuna Jr. is having. And that's why I think he's going to be able to get more than enough support to win the MVP award, despite the fact that other guys have great cases. They'll get their votes as well. I just feel like Ronald Acuna Jr.'s greatness is too much to be denied in one season. He is combining too many facets of the game that should not be this easy for anyone.
You know what? And I think that, like, it's just stat after stat after stat, and it just gets to a point where you're just like, all right, like this conversation should have been over at some point. But I think I really do think it is. But I just found it interesting that Bill Plaschke wanted to take the time out just to say, hey, this dude has done something no one has ever done in Major League Baseball history, regardless of rules, regardless of size of bags and everything like that. And don't pay attention to that. But just look at this stat right here. And this guy has played multiple positions. I just thought it was kind of weird. So, yeah, I'm with you on that, man. Ronald Acuna Jr. has done something that I thought it's wonderful. It's been great to actually sit down and watch. But coming into the season, though, coming off injury, and we know a lot of times with those knee injuries, I know with football players, it's that second year after that injury, that you look for it and say you really see how that person is, to get back to where the player that he used to be. But I did not see Ronald Acuna Jr. coming back better than he was before he got hurt. Did you see this coming?
I don't know that I could tell you that I saw this level coming, but as you know, if you follow me on social media, I was saying this is a 40-40 counter for this guy because the home runs are going to be back. And the home runs last year, he hit 15 of them. And that was one of the strangest things, but you could tell that leg was still an issue for him, I think both physically and also mentally. And, you can't really, I think, discount either of those two things. But as I've talked to Ronald a handful of times this year, the thing he has told me is, look, all of these other things are a byproduct of me feeling 100% healthy. When I feel healthy, I'm able to play the game the way I want to. And you can tell how he likes to play the game. I mean, he loves the opportunity to just make an impact, and he does it. And I asked him, how do you cut down your strikeouts like this? I mean, is there something in particular that you worked on? And he said, honestly, I'm more aggressive now. I just don't want to miss my pitch. And that's a pretty crazy thing to think about, a hitter that can be that aggressive, but he doesn't walk a ton. So I guess there's a point in all of that, but whatever he's doing, it's working. And that's the biggest thing. His buddy Ozzie Albies has been his hype man for a long time. He said he expected Ronald to be better than he was in 2019 when he was 3 stolen bases away from 40-40. And Ozzie Albies, who am I to disagree with a guy that's had a front row seat for the Ronald Acuna Jr. show for a number of years? Those guys were right. I expected it to be a run at 40-40, and that could culminate as soon as Wednesday's game against the Philadelphia Phillies, but sometime soon, I would imagine. This has been above and beyond, I think, what anybody could have realistically expected, and the bar was already pretty high.
Speaking of expectations, how about Max Fried? Coming out, ever since he's come back from the injury, he's just been lights out, barring the little blister, or they kind of sat him down take him out of the game against the Phillies, and dealing with that particular injury. So just how Max Fried has been able to wade through the waters, I guess, if I want to use that analogy. How do you feel like he's been able to do that? And like, just given how he's performed since he come back off an injury, because we know that, probably in the back of his mind, he's starting to think about that contract situation.
Yeah, maybe. I think Max is pretty good, and most guys have to be, about you putting aside, looking through numbers. Like Ronald Acuna Jr. doesn't spend a lot of time doing that. If you're a player, there's a time to look over your contract status and situation, and clearly the agent is hired for a reason to, I think, take the brunt of all of that and figure those things out. But for Max, it was about getting himself back on the mound and being able to be part of what was really shaping up to be a special season, despite the fact you didn't have one of your ace starting pitchers, really 2 of your top starting pitchers throughout the course of the season. But Max, I feel like, was the guy that kind of sets the tone for the rotation and sets it in the way that it needs to be for the postseason. We heard from him on Tuesday. He's dealt with the blisters in the past, but it was really more so when he was in the minor leagues and his prospect status, and maybe a little bit in 2018 when he first came to the majors. But it had been a long time since Max Fried and blister had been mentioned in the same sentence. But he said, look, it was something that was starting to work its way up. With the timeline we have right now, there is no take 2 or 3 weeks off to let a blister heal. You want to be able to, not miss any time and be available to your team for the most important innings you're going to throw. He says they caught it early on. He was able to protect it a little bit, do some throwing. He threw a bullpen session, though, on Monday and did not have to use anything on the finger. It is healed to the point that he needs it to. It's the left index finger that typically works up that blister. He said he's dealt with some little intermittent things before. If it was a postseason start, he would have kept going. But it's just one of those things that the Braves have put themselves in a position to take it easy here over the final couple of weeks if somebody has something that needs to be dealt with, because they've already handled the business of punching their ticket to the postseason, clinching the National League East, and getting home field advantage, at least in the first round, with probably more to come.
And I'm sure that, I'm expecting Max Fried to be the ace of the staff that he's been ever since he come back. And speaking of, I want to talk about Spencer Strider for a little bit. Like, we used a lot of superlatives when speaking about Ronald Acuna Jr. and obviously with Max Fried as well, but like Spencer Strider, it's just something about him that I can't quite put my finger on. I know strikeouts, fastball, and all that stuff, and just being so cerebral and how he interviews and everything like that. But do you think that Spencer Strider has done enough to be able to warrant a Cy Young this year?
Yeah, I expect him to be in the top 3, if not the top 2 at worst. And, the real thing that you look at, I think, with Spencer Strider is the level of domination that he has. And really, if there's been one common thread in 2023 that might kind of undermine his case, he's been a little bit more home run prone. And that has been a thing that we've seen time and again, that even when he has a great start and the Braves win that game, there seems to be, hey, there's that 2-run homer that kind of ruined his stat line, or that 3-run homer. I mean, it happened against the Phillies in his most recent outing. Bryce Harper snuck one out over the right field wall on a changeup. If you ask Spencer Strider, he might say, well, shouldn't have thrown that changeup, should have challenged him with a fastball, should have looked to put him away in a different fashion. But that's the hindsight that comes with pitching, with baseball, with all the sports, and probably with life as well. But Spencer Strider is, I think, the prototypical power pitcher. If you were to just say, what kind of pitcher do I want to build to have on my staff to run through the regular season and through October, you'd want a guy that racks up strikeouts nearly 14 per nine. He's at 270 on the season, and he's doing that, in less than 200 innings, which is just boggles the mind to think about that, because typically when you saw the 300 strikeout guys, and I looked them up, a bunch of them last night, usually 220, 230 innings for the lower level 300 strikeout guys. The ones like Nolan Ryan that threw 300 plus innings, well, you can tell how they got there, but also had great stuff. But Spencer Strider is the kind of strikeout pitcher that you don't see too terribly often. So that's going to garner a lot of attention. But I would also look at the fact that when he's on the mound, the Braves win about 80% of the time. That, I think, is something that you want to call, even if you put pitcher wins aside, is a hallmark of the kind of pitcher that's going to get Cy Young consideration. A lot of the advanced, the expected stats really speak to Spencer Strider's dominance, but it really has just been the home run ball that from time to time has kind of blown up a couple of lines and maybe taken him from a guy that should have an ERA around 2.7 or 2.8 to a guy that's pushing around the 3.5 mark. And that might be something that old school voters look at. I know ERA and pitcher wins are not the end all be all for pitcher statistics and evaluation in 2023, but they do carry a little bit of weight. And you don't see too many Cy Young winners that are able to pull that off with an ERA well north of 3. But you also are talking about the major league strikeout leader, a guy that's going to set some franchise history, and a guy that dominates lineups. So it's going to be an interesting vote. I'm not sure who's going to come out on top. Maybe Justin Steele of the Cubs, maybe somebody else. It could be a case to be made for Blake Snell, for Zach Gallen, but Spencer Strider's the top 5 for sure.
For sure. And last one, I want to get you out on this one. How does one put together a quiet 52 home runs, 130 RBIs, and a 609 slugger percentage? How does one put together a quiet season like that?
I think we'd have to ask Matt Olson how exactly you do that, because most years we'd be talking about an MVP case that was being written about day in and day out. But on a club that has one of the the premier superstars in all of baseball, and Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson has kind of taken a back seat to that. But I'll tell you this, I don't think Matt Olson minds that, and I'm not sure that Ronald
either. I'm with you.
Is too concerned about where he finishes in the MVP voting either, for that matter. There's a lot of focus on this team about where they want to go collectively. And Matt Olson has said, my success this year is a byproduct of a guy like Ronald Acuna Jr. at the top, setting the tone for this order. You guys like Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna, the protection he has now in the middle of the order as well. A lot of guys, they look at it up and down. Matt said, I don't feel the pressure to be the one RBI guy in this lineup, because lots of guys can get it done 1 through 9. So I think being able to relax, being settled in here more in Atlanta in the second year, and just having one of the best home run swings that you're going to find in all of baseball is how you do the things that he's done this year. But even Matt, I think growing up a kid watching the Atlanta Braves and being an Atlanta metro area native, probably didn't see himself setting the franchise home run record, but that's exactly what he's done.
Grant McAuley, man, thanks for your time, my friend.
You got it.
Coming up next, we will take a look ahead and we'll keep the party going.